So I'm here because I'm really lucky. I'm lucky enough to have worked with some inspiring feminists, both women and men. And so what I'm going to do is share with you something that they've taught me. And the thing that they've taught me is that feminism makes all of us, but I think especially men, better citizens. There we go. Okay. So before we talk about feminism and citizenship, I think it's worth talking a little bit about the word feminism. It certainly makes a lot of people squirm, right? But what does feminism as a term actually mean? There are about as many answers to that as there are feminists, of course. And I think we can go back to 1913 when the British author and activist Rebecca West said this: "People call me a feminist whenever I express sentiments that differentiate me from a doormat." And I think that rings, sadly, still fairly true. Or there's this. This is the Bolivian activist Domitila Barrios de la Hongara, and she said that feminism is women being respected as human beings who can solve problems and participate in everything: culture, art, literature, politics, trade unionism. A liberation that means our opinion is respected at home and outside the home. And to me, that gets quite close to a working definition of something else that we're talking about today: citizenship. Citizenship, to me, means being able to meaningfully participate in the life of the community, right? It means having a voice in the decisions that guide that community, and it means having a stake in the outcomes. And so power is a big part of citizenship, of course. And it's when we start to talk about power that the term feminism starts to freak people, and especially men, out. And make no mistake, feminism is very much about power. It's about giving women the same power to influence their own worlds as men have. The problem is that on first glance, this can seem like some kind of zero-sum game, that everything that women gain has to be somehow taken from men. And it can also feel unfair. It can feel like feminism is privileging women above men. And I don't think there's any much ground under either of those fears, and thinking a little bit about citizenship is a good way to understand why. So let's look for a second at that first point. Is there any reason why strengthening citizenship for women means weakening it for men? I don't think so. Now, when women won the vote, men certainly had less control than they did the day before women had the vote, right? But citizenship is about so much more than control, and it happens in so many more places than the ballot box. There's no zero-sum game being played here simply because there's not a fixed amount of citizenship to go around. Instead, the more space there is for women's voices, the more ideas there are out there in the public sphere for all of us, whatever our gender, to pick up and to build with. And so by making us aware of how society systematically privileges men's voices over women's, feminism helps us build a space to have that discussion and to get those ideas out there in the first place. So it's that privilege that feminism is asking me as a man to give up, not my voice as a citizen. Now, I think it's worth also going back to that second word, that feminism is somehow unfair. And now's a good time maybe for a little reality check, courtesy of Statistics Canada. So women earn 83 cents on the dollar to every male dollar in Canada. In Newfoundland, it's closer to, I think, 57. Women do 14 hours a week of unpaid domestic work, compared with 8 for men. On average, women spend about twice as much time providing childcare. And there's Parliament, of course, 75% men. So when we look at numbers like that, it's pretty hard to argue that feminism has tilted the playing field steeply in women's favor. So we end up with two realities. We end up with the one reality defined by statistics like this and by the lived experience of so many women, and the other reality defined by words like this. This is the Newfoundland Human Rights Code. And feminism helps us bridge these two. It asks us to look beyond paper promises like this to see how they're actually playing out in women's lives. So when we're talking about citizenship, that means that we need to move beyond talking about equality of rights and start talking about equality of opportunities. And that brings a lot of new things into the discussion. Let's take a familiar example for all of us. We're in St. John's. Snow comes down, 30 centimeters on the streets, the sidewalks disappear, right? So now say I put on my citizen hat. I want to get some people downtown together to have a chat. Fine, let's do it. Then I hear from a friend of mine. She's a young mother, and she reminds me that she's got a little kid, and she's got no car, and it's not remotely safe for her to make it down to the meeting. And I stop, and I think, and I realize that with women much more likely to be taking care of children at any given time, there is a real barrier to participation here. Now, if we think about citizenship as something that happens, as the result of an odd meeting or a vote here or there, we can kind of shrug that off, right? But I don't think that citizenship is a one-off. It's something that's built, and it's built out of this string of small day-to-day interactions that's so easy to take for granted. Now, let's not paint a picture here of all women as homemakers or as halves of a nuclear family. There are many other possibilities here. And there are also other things that can get in the way of women's participation. There's the old boys club mentality, right, of backroom conversations, sexist jokes, all that stuff. And there are also solutions. If kids are involved, sort out childcare. Meet in a space where women feel comfortable. Reach out and make sure that you engage with women's voices. I've seen it happen, and it works. So here's the question, right? What does this all mean? I think at its core, feminism is critical thinking. It teaches us never to accept just the way things are as an explanation, and it demands that we always ask why. And that is a powerful, powerful act of citizenship. It also reminds us to look for the structural barriers that stand in front of so many other people. People living with disabilities, people living in poverty, people of color. And I think, from my perspective at least, of all the insights that I've gotten from my feminism, the ones that have impacted me the most are when I look at myself. As a man, I have grown up in a society that makes it pretty easy for me to feel like a citizen. A lot of the people in power look like me. A lot of them sound like me. I've always been encouraged to speak out, to assert myself. Often enough, I've actually pushed women from a conversation. Or I've ignored the barriers that are keeping them from letting themselves in. And now, not all of my privilege comes from my gender, right? But plenty of it does, and that's something I think I and all men have a real power to change. So now, what does it matter for a big issue like citizenship if Josh learns to listen better, right? In and of itself sounds like not much, but I think in here there's actually a powerful feminist lesson. That the little day-to-day interactions between all of us play a major role in defining how our whole society thinks about women and the possibilities that it creates for them. So from a male perspective, I think that's a pretty positive and a pretty empowering thought. It means that when we engage in small acts of feminism, calling out a man on a sexist joke, say, or stopping ourselves before we speak over a woman in a meeting, we're doing something lasting, and we're doing something useful. When we offer a supporting word to our friends or to our partners, or when we pause for a second before embracing princess culture for our daughters, we're using our privilege to open up a space for their voices. And it's making that space that's key, right? I'm sure you've noticed it's plenty ironic. I'm a man standing up here on the stage going on about women's lived experiences. And yet, I do think there is a role for men to add to this conversation. Not by speaking for women, but by helping create the conditions that make women completely free to speak for themselves. That's feminism, and that's good citizenship. Thank you.